Hi, I'm Rick Brimacombe on behalf of the Minneapolis Club and my firm, Brimacombe & Associates. Welcome to Club Entrepreneur. For those of you who don't know me, I've been doing venture capital deals for over 20 years. Ultimately, my job is to inspire people to do things they never thought possible. In short, I'm an advisor, co-founder, investor, board member, and business person, and I look to help projects that I love and can add value to. Well, we've already had the state fair. School started, football season. No, yeah, we got a state fair fan over there, or football, which one?
State fair.
The state fair, all right. State fair, football, fall's here, and I was up north last weekend, and actually some of the leaves are starting to turn up there. So with that means we're in fall, and welcome to the 11th season of Club Entrepreneur. Thank you. I told the folks at the club that this was the 11th season, and if anybody's dipped into their dessert first, you might notice that on the strawberry there's a number 11, so that's what that is for. Aw, nice of the club to do that.
I'm sure that was your idea.
That totally was my idea. I said, hey, this is the 11th season. Is there something we can do with number 11? And the club said they'd figure it out. So I did not think of the strawberries, but I did tell them that we were kicking off a new season. And then to tell you how far back that goes, 11 years ago, the iPhone was just being introduced. So iPhone 8 is supposedly coming out like this week or next week or whatever. So the iPhone was just being introduced way back then. Anyway, it's been a pleasure for me to be a part of your entrepreneurial journey, and I've tried to help inform, connect, and inspire all of you. So again, thanks for coming. Thanks for fitting Club Entrepreneur into your world. We have a powerful community, 5 locations, and here just in Minneapolis, I've done probably about 125 to 150 meetings and probably had 9,000 or 9,500 people come to these. So thank you again for helping make this possible. Which leads me to our sponsors. There are these little cards on the table. Our sponsors are Schwegman, Lundberg, Woosner, an intellectual property law firm. They've been a sponsor actually since year 1, 2007. Mike Bromelkamp to my right, representing Olson Thielen CPAs, a full-service accounting firm. They've been a sponsor since 2009. Darren Lynch is sitting right here in front of me. Darren Lynch is founder and CEO at Irish Titan, a web development and e-commerce company. They've been a sponsor since 2013. Sunbelt Business Brokers and M&A advisory firm came on board last year. McLeod and Company, Tanya right here in front. Tanya McLeod, holistic marketing agency, came on board earlier this year. And then our newest sponsor is Highland Bank, a local family-owned community bank. Rick Wall, the CEO, is over here. And Rick Wall and I have known one another since shortly after college. Kind of jokingly say I know some stories about him. He knows some more stories about me. And that will go no further. All right, the Network Connect is also a sponsor. Network Connect is a catalytic gateway for connecting investors, companies, and service providers. Dick Summerstead and I do that together. All right, so those sponsors make this happen. I've worked with and interacted with all of them. They're great folks. They do good work. So if you can use them or need their services, please do. All right, you can see we have a full room. With that said, the room can hold more people. We had an unusually high number of folks walk up today. One hand, that's good, a lot of enthusiasm. The other hand is the club has to scramble a little bit to find enough food for everyone. So as a reminder, if you RSVP online through brown paper ticket, through either Club East site or the Minneapolis Club website, makes their job a little easier. So they and I would appreciate that. With that said, they did a nice job of pulling another table out and scrambling to get food. So again, sign up on brown paper ticket. Generally, we're the first Thursday of the month. Clube.com allows you to sign up for the newsletter and get videos, events, and market your own business if you would like. These cards have a pointer towards the LinkedIn group. We have about 2,400 people on LinkedIn through Club Entrepreneur. We also have a meetup group. There's about 1,700 folks from meetup here. And I know that we have 1 or 2 new attendees that came through meetup, so welcome those folks. I also have an email distribution list. If you would like to get on that, let me know. And last but not least, Minneapolis Club is a wonderful venue. Obviously, food's good, people are great. I've been a member since 2000, 2001. Been a great addition to my life, both personally and professionally. If you'd like to learn more about the Minneapolis Club, you can see me, or they put a few flyers out on the table. On the table as well is a pointer towards future events. We have Club E Hudson on September 12th. We have Club E St. Paul on September 20th. There's an upsize event on the 19th. Right here next month, utilizing boards. And then Irish Titan, Darren Lynch, right up here in front, put blue cards out on the table. He has his e-com forum. And how many years have you been doing this, Darren? This will be the third year. Great event. Good speakers from around the country and serious domain experts. So if you're interested in e-commerce, either see Darren afterwards or take one of these blue cards or ask me about it. Clubby has been a sponsor of that the last couple of years. Okay, with that, let's get to our panel, Grow and Successfully Exit Your Business. I have three panelists, Jeff Buchanan, Matt Goldberg, and Jim Salsonaire. And I've got to know those folks a little bit in kind of prepping for this event. I think you're in for a real treat. This is intended to be an interactive dialogue, so at any point, if you have a question, please raise your hand and I'll try to weave you into the conversation. I have a few things here to work through with them, but it's my pleasure to bring this panel to you. Jeff is a seasoned entrepreneur and founder of J.L. Buchanan. He's got deep domain expertise in retailing and consumer-oriented businesses. Matt Goldberg and I have known each other for a number of years. He's a transformational CEO and an EOS implementer, and he also has run a couple of consumer-facing businesses. And then Jim is managing partner at Salsonaire Group. He's been CEO and president of RTD Company, which he sold, and that's going to be a big part of what he talks about. His strengths are in leadership, sales, and marketing, so we have a lot of market-oriented, selling-oriented, consumer-facing expertise here. So again, I'll go through my stuff, but please raise your hand if you have any questions. So with that, why don't we hear from everybody? Give us a little bit more on your background, fill in between the lines a little bit on my introduction. So let's start with you, Jeff.
Sure, I'd love to. Thanks for including me, Rick. I do take issue with my introduction as a seasoned entrepreneur. I'm not sure how to take that. I'll take it positively. Any rate, I founded a company, J.L. Buchanan, which was a consulting company that worked with suppliers to Target. Founded that in 1986. Prior to that, though, I was my education is in psychology and counseling, and people say, well, isn't that kind of an unusual background for a businessman? And I would say, on the contrary, through that I learned the skill of listening and being directed towards other people's needs. So it's been a very vital, actually, background for me in my business career. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Rick. My name is Matt Goldberg, and I've been running businesses for the last 20 years for business owners that want to take their businesses to the next level and are just stuck, for investors that don't feel like they have a lot of control in the businesses that they're investing in, and also I've owned businesses myself. I've really run these businesses across channel, vertical, and industry, and I've sold 4 companies. And for the 20 years, how many people know what EOS is in the room? Show of hands. So a fair amount of people. So I've been an integrator in all these companies, kind of a cross-functional leader, where I'm responsible for building the business plan and delivering it, and responsible for the P&L. Since I sold the last business, which was a women's fashion accessory company about 2 years ago, I've switched over, and I'm kind of turning EOS from the inside out, and now I'm an implementer and going in and helping leadership teams run EOS.
Thank you.
I'm the least seasoned of the bunch up here, so just to make that very clear. I'm Jim Sulsner. I purchased my company in the beginning of 2000 and sold it in 2012, and the company was called the RTD Company. We were a temperature... Oh, sure. How's that? Better? I sold it in the fall of 2012 to what eventually became Tyco. We were a temperature sensor manufactured sensors, anything from ablation catheters to GE motors, and quickly became worldwide. I had no intention of selling it, and I got an offer I couldn't turn down. And so...
And actually, that's interesting that you say that, because a little later, one of the questions we had posed here was, "Hey, I got a call out of the blue. Wasn't planning on it." So we'll get to that a little bit later. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for sharing your stories with us. So why don't we go back down the line? Start with you, Jeff. Tell us a little bit about how you grew your company. The sale, how that went about, and just kind of share a little bit of kind of the background there to give a little bit more color to everybody.
Sure. So as I mentioned, in 1986, I started the company. We had 7 employees and did less than $1 million worth of business. And at the time of sale, we were 85 employees and nearing 20 million. So pretty substantial growth. As you might imagine, there's a couple moments during this time that, as I reflect back, that were I would call seminal. One is I've always been, as I mentioned in my background comments, other-directed, and the success of paying attention to the person across the table. What changed probably late 90s was, in addition to the focus of the customer, we really changed to focusing on our customer's customer. In other words, what keeps your customer's customer up at night? And that became an incredible change, a change in point of view, but also brought us into some new businesses that were consumer-focused and really, where we were paying attention to what the needs and wants were. Once you understand that, it's pretty easy, frankly, from that point on. About 10 years ago, I realized that we needed to take the Jeff out of jail Buchanan. I was kind of the sole salesperson, and I had a team, a pretty big team around me that made me look good. And I embarked on really a change in transition in leadership. One of the things that was pivotal there was a change also in point of view. My CEO, or president at the time, handed me this book. I don't know if anybody's seen this book called Work Sucks, but it's about, and it did, it's about a concept called ROWE, and it's results-only work environment. And so what you do is reward people or you manage the work, not the people. You don't care about where they are or when they are. They know what they're supposed to do, and it's a keen focus on really the result. And that changed everything for us. We became incredibly more productive. And over the course of that, and that was 2008, keep in mind, we know what happened. The course of the last 10 years, we've double-digit growth every year. Now, I'm not going to say ROWE was the reason, but it was a reason, and really, really important. And we can talk about what that means and how it worked for us, but it was really, really an unbelievable uptime for us. So that's how we grew. And then the sales process was really, I knew I had to transition. I was getting older, and realizing that I needed to do something. We looked at many, many options, still hadn't come to grips with anything, and then all of a sudden we got a knock on the door, and a big firm came talking to us. Over the course of that time, I hired an investment banker to help, because we're not in the business of selling our business. We're in the business of doing business. So we needed help. Long story short, that deal fell through. At the end of the day, it just wasn't right. Shortly thereafter, an individual investor came to me and was interested. We went through the same process again, and that fell apart. I said to the team, I said, we're done. We're done. We've been too distracted. Let's just, buckle down. 2 months later, we get another knock on the door, and we said, okay, we're going to talk to these people and listen until we don't like it anymore. And to be honest with you, we threw a lot of obstacles their way because we were playing a little hard to get, and they answered every one of them. So we came to an agreement, and a year ago sold the business. So
Playing hard to get. Worked for
guess.
you anyway.
Yeah.
Matt, so tell us a little bit about your story in growing the couple of businesses you've been involved in
Okay.
running and the sale of those businesses.
Okay. So I'll share a little bit of information on the last business that I helped grow and sell. It was a company called Hollywood Fashion Secrets, and I was introduced to a couple of the founders of the business, and they were highly creative visionaries, like a lot of founders are. They were good at coming up with product ideas and had new ideas all the time, but they were stagnating in terms of their revenue growth and their profitability. Believe it or not, they came up with this product called Fashion Tape, which is this 3M product that helps women hold their clothes on. And when I first met them, I thought, there's no way that there's a business here. And believe it or not, and they also had a brand that was bigger than their business. A lot of people knew about them, but they really didn't know how to scale the business. So I joined them, and they were selling primarily into specialty stores and boutiques. And had maybe a half dozen products at the time. I came in and we switched the strategy and created this new category at retail called Style Essentials. And basically, it was taking the tips and the tricks of the red carpet that stylists were using and bringing them to the everyday woman. And because retailers are looking for new categories, we had to really pump up our R&D and get new products in. So we came up with about 90 products. We were in 30,000 doors, retail doors, and really had to build out our sales and marketing with people that understood how to sell into mass, drug, food, and large chain, which we didn't have the capabilities of previously. We also didn't have the right supply chain set up. So we had to build all the different functional areas of the business. So we got it to a really nice point, and one of the founders had left the business from an operating standpoint, and we ended up hiring an investment banker. And it took about 9 months, and we ended up selling to a $300 million strategic buyer to California that was a beauty company, and they rolled us out into 120 countries because they wanted our brands and our products. So it was a good deal.
Great, thank you. Jim?
My story is a little bit different than these two guys, but the way we grew our business, and there's some similarities as well, is that we focused on sales, sales, and sales. And I couldn't emphasize more how important that customer was. So we went after everything we could. The temperature industry is a huge industry. As you can imagine, it's in everything we do today. When I purchased the company, it was in a very narrow band of product offerings. We widened the product offerings. We did one thing that I look back at it, it was probably the most clever thing we did, but it drove the people at our business crazy. And that is, I took everybody's catalog that was in the industry themselves, and I compared the one that we had inherited when we bought the business. And the one we had was a 4x6, black and white, maybe 20 pages, and I said, oh, this just isn't going to work. And so what I did is I took my competitors' catalogs, put them on the table, and I said, I want something that's a blend of all of these. And they said, well, we don't make any of that. I said, well, I don't care. I said, we're going to make it. And so I sold ahead of our operational people, which is a very dangerous place to go unless you have a very strong staff in-house. And fortunately, we did. I took a 20-page catalog and turned it into a 200 colored page catalogs, and we just took off from there. And we never stopped. The other thing I did, which was something that I had been somewhat acquainted to, since my wife is a patent attorney and also works for Schwegman, which is one of the sponsors here. No plug for them, but we
Why not?
thank you. We developed a sensor for the ablation catheter business, and that sensor went into every ablation catheter that Boston Scientific had made, which is a disposable product. I didn't realize how important and profitable medical disposable products are. This one took off. Well, the minute we found out that Boston Scientific loved that product, I was in the parking lot. I called my wife up and I said, I need a patent now. And so to get a patent pending is a very easy process. The rest of the process gets a little bit more complicated. And as a result of a patent pending on this product, over the years, we finally got a patent on it. We had an infringer on it, and that infringer just so happened to be the company that ended up purchasing us because they didn't want to go into any litigation. And the offer they eventually gave us was something I could just not turn down. That's my story in a nutshell.
So the takeaway there is to be married to a patent attorney.
That would be one of them, yes.
All right, so why don't we stay down there? Jim, tell us a little bit of kind of the key takeaways. Two sides, right? Key takeaways on growing the business and key takeaways from selling the business in that exit process.
You know, growing the business, I really did the as my two cohorts did. I was really the face of the company, and being the face of the company, I was out in front of our customers all the time. I also became the face of the company with our key suppliers, which I found out was just as important as those customers, because it's those relationships that really helped us as we were growing. It was you know, if I were to point at things, you know, it is sales, it is marketing, it is engineering, and it is having a strong infrastructure in place. Selling the business was a little bit, you know, again, I never had set up the business to sell it at the time I did, but I always kept the business clean in case somebody wanted to to buy it. And because I got approached, and because we had that philosophy, and that philosophy really came from the fact that many of us came from larger corporations, so we knew how to integrate that into a small business. A lot of small businesses, as I've learned since then, you know, don't have that talent base. We did. So we always projected ourselves much bigger than we were. And as a result of that, when it came time to sell it, we looked bigger than we were. And as a result of that, we were very organized, we were very methodical, we had all the information at hand, and the process went very quickly. And we ended up selling it into the due diligence, which usually can take anywhere from 6 to 12 months. Ours took 2. And so from the offer, from the letter of intent to actually cutting the check was exactly 2 months.
Very impressive.
Thank you.
So thank you for sharing that. Matt, tell us a little bit about more about growing the business, some of the things you did, strategic decisions. You told us some, expanding the product line and in essence making a category, and then also tell us some of the things you learned about the sales process of the company.
Okay. So our approach was a little bit different, where I've always built businesses to sell them. And so in terms of the growth, I guess the bullet points are, I always make sure that we're working on the business as hard as we're working in the business. And as I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, they're so busy with the day-to-day that it's difficult to find time to work on the business, but looking at where you are in the marketplace and who could be potential acquirers and what your value proposition is really important. I'd also add just continuing to evaluate the pain points of the changing customer landscape. Every industry is changing so quickly, and you want to make sure that your value proposition and your narrative really is addressing the pain points of the market. Also, when you're growing quickly as a business, our business was growing the last few years at 35% plus a year, and you want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. It's so easy for the company, for the employees to be in a frenzy and worrying about what their deadlines are. But unless they have a strong idea of what the vision is and they've bought into the vision of the business and they understand what their individual role is to achieve that vision, the wheels can fall off the bus pretty quickly. And finally, don't underestimate the importance of cash flow and shortening the cash conversion cycle as much as you possibly can. In terms of selling the business, the two most important things that we did is we put an operating system in. You know, whether there's eMyth, there's Gazelles, there's EOS. It really doesn't matter. I think they're all pretty similar. They're all good fits for different sized businesses. But having a system that you actually operate your business on really helps in the sale process, because the acquirer really sees a structured company and sees that you have processes in place that are actually that give some runway to the business. The other thing is we set up an advisory board, and I also think that this is a great move for most small businesses. Most small businesses can't afford to have 75 to 100 years of experience around a table on their payroll. So to be able to have these people around a table on a quarterly basis and advising you really helps in selling the business. I'd also say systemize your company as much as possible if you want to sell it. So many businesses are highly dependent on the founder or a couple of key individuals, and acquirers are nervous about what happens after the transaction, and that person loses interest and motivation to drive the business if they're still involved. And also pick the right intermediary. There's so many different types of people that help you sell your business these days. You want to make sure that someone is really vested in your business, that they understand what you're doing and can tell your story and position you in the marketplace. So whether it's a broker or whether it's a financial advisor or an investment bank, you just want to make sure that you're really important to them in the process.
Great, thanks, Matt. Jeff?
So, in terms of growth, I really believe that culture is the most important thing you can do. And Peter Drucker has this famous quote, "But culture eats strategy for breakfast." And it's true. If you develop a culture in your company of respect and responsibility, a lot of great things can come of that. Part of, I mentioned grow and results only, that is part and parcel to building that culture of respect and responsibility. Leading with humility is another core principle that I believe in, and I can go into that for a long time, but won't right now. And then agility. I set out to build a company that was very agile. That means it could respond to change, and as we all know, that happens quickly and when you least expect it. So if you're prepared for it and your company is agile, then you're ready. In terms of the selling process, as I mentioned, I wasn't in the business of selling a business, so I had a lot to learn. So enlisting experts, Matthew mentioned, is important. Getting your financial house in order is very important. And then I think for me, preparing emotionally and preparing for the distraction of your key people that are also going to be heavily involved is pretty important. And not letting it sort of infiltrate the rest of the team, because it is a distraction and it will affect the results.
Great, thank you. If there was one thing on the helping your company or team be agile and be prepared to adapt, if there was kind of one thing that you could expand on as a takeaway for the audience?
Well, I think it's really, well, I think one thing is not taking yourself so seriously. That's helpful. But realizing that it's not about perfect. It's about good enough, and that is perfect. And doing your best is perfect. So I would just say, don't be afraid to try something new.
Great, thank you. All right, so I have some questions here. I'm going to keep going into them, but I see some stuff here. So I saw you first, so let's go with you, Dean.
Question, Jeff, for you. You mentioned the 3 rounds you did in selling your company. You hired an investment banker in the first round. Could you take us through the process of hiring that investment banker? Would you use the same one for the other rounds, or change the whole investment banking process?
Okay, so if people didn't hear it over here or over here, question was through the process, there were a couple of different starts and stops. Was there a investment banker hired? How'd that go? How'd that work? What'd you learn from it?
And we hired this person after we'd been approached. As I said, we didn't really know how this process worked. The financial advisor we used was someone, or the investment banker was part of a financial advisory firm that we'd used to manage a lot of our retirement benefits and things like that. So it was sort of an alignment and someone we trusted. I didn't go out and interview. It was more about a relationship there. In the other rounds, we didn't use anybody except legal counsel. We felt we knew enough at that point, and we didn't need help selling it. We had someone there that was willing to buy it, but we need help navigating the legal aspects.
While we're on this question, just to take it further, Matt, you did use a banker. Tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about that.
So we interviewed quite a few bankers, and everything from local, smaller investment banks to banks that handled companies that were in the beauty industry. And we ended up hiring somebody out of San Francisco that had run Piper's Consumer Group and started their own small boutique. So it was really important for them to, financially, we weren't as big as anything Piper was handling, obviously. So we wouldn't have been a good fit when he was there. But when he was at his own boutique firm and he really wanted to have us in their portfolio to tell a story, we were very important to him. So, and then we just did our due diligence and talked to a lot of the people of the businesses that they had sold in the past, and they knew the category inside and out and knew all the people to contact, and so it was a great fit for us.
And why don't we get Jim to chime in? Now, you did not hire a banker, but you got approached, so.
We didn't, and the difference between mine and these guys is that we got approached, but one of the key denominators is we had strong legal counsel. And so during that process, we had legal representative, and then we also had an outside accounting firm that we had done a annual review of our books. So when the time came, as I said early on, we were a pretty clean purchase for what ended up being a strategic buyer in our case. Now one of the coincidence that happened to us is during that process, we also had a private equity company approach us to buy the business. At the same time, the strategic buyer was buying it. So I was able to play a little bit off of them, and I used our legal counsel to set up the meetings and to really decide which direction we were going to go. And one of the things that became very clear, and this was the distraction I think some of these folks are talking about, is that for the growth of the business, it was really important to get everybody engaged in the process of selling it. And we decided to go with a strategic buyer because it was an easy transition for the folks that were going to be left behind. And so for us, it was an easy process. And again, it was 2 months is pretty fast to buy business that we had gone through.
Absolutely. Dave, you had a question. So if you didn't hear that, on either side was the strategic buyers. How do you navigate that, especially if they can be a lot bigger? And Matt, you mentioned
Ours was an 8,000-pound gorilla, and we navigated through it quite well. And I think the reason we did is we were really represented well on the outside. Instead of having an investment banker that has everybody at their fingertips, we had outside legal counsel that represented us, and of course we paid them, and we had outside accounting firms that represented us, and we had our ducks in order during that process. So it was a very simplified process. I've heard stories on the contrary to that. Ours wasn't. But again, it's because I can't overemphasize, for us, we kept our books in line, we kept our processes in line, and we showed well. And this goes back to the whole perception part of it. And so they asked less questions.
Matt, strategic buyer was a lot bigger than you.
Yeah, so our buyer was strategic, much bigger than us, and so I had two partners in the business, and they wanted a strategic buyer. I didn't care if we sold to private equity or not. I would have been able to go on and run the business, hopefully for a few more years. But when it came down, well, our banker really wanted to make sure we brought as many people as close to the finish line as possible. So we didn't give the strategic any indication until very close to the close that they were going to be the one that we were going to go with. So we really, tried to position them against each other, and let them know that we were talking to both strategics and private equity. So the banker did a great job of kind of herding cats, because one of the biggest surprises that I had was that the buyers, especially the 800-pound gorilla, they do things on their own timeline. And unless you have multiple people in the process, they're just going to drag you along and say, we're going to put this on hold for 3 months, and it's so disruptive to your company. So a good banker for us really kept everybody in line.
Jeff, would you like to add anything on this one?
Yes, the firm that bought us was a strategic buyer. We were part of their strategy. They lacked one at Target and needed us. Their choice was to buy us or try to build their own, and of course we were the most expedient choice. They wanted us pretty badly, so things moved along quickly and didn't throw up any obstacles at all. But yeah, they're back to that 8,000 pound. They're a big firm, so.
Sure. Eric. So if you couldn't hear that one, Eric asked a question of handling the emotional change, and I'm curious, take his and I'm going to add to it a little bit. So there's an emotional decision on the front end. So how did you know that you were ready or was the right time? And then there's an emotional part on the back end. So maybe comment on those two aspects of the process.
Sure. I was 52 when I sold my business, so I didn't take it well. I wasn't ready to sell the business, and so my biggest fear was, what was I going to do afterwards? Well, I was right. After I'd sold the business, I stayed on for about 1.5 years. I had a employment agreement that would pay me for 4 years. And honestly, if you're getting ready to sell your business, don't stay in it longer than 6. You don't own it anymore. The company that buys you tells you what to do. You can't even buy a pencil. And that's very hard when you've lived and breathed this business for as many years as most would. And so I would highly recommend anybody in that position exit within 6 months. Moving forward, I just started to do what I had done previously, and I just went out and met as many people as I could, and started getting involved in advisory roles and in different positions with different companies, trying to help them grow their business. And so it still is a transition in process for me.
And Jim, you filled your dance card up a little bit with some other projects.
I did. I got into some advisory roles that kept me busy a few hours a week, and then I recently took a part-time job helping another gentleman run his business that I'm transitioning out as well. The big difference is once you've run a business, the best thing you could possibly do for somebody else is advise them. It's never the same. At least it wasn't for me. It hasn't been for me yet.
So I got good advice on the front end. I didn't even consider. Even though we engaged someone to sell the business, I didn't think about it in terms of selling the business, because once you kind of make your mind up that you're going to be exiting, it's really hard to be vested in interested in driving the business still. And there's so many ups and downs in the process, and you think it's going to be sold, and before you know it, the floor falls from under you, and you're starting from scratch again. So the front end, I just kind of ignored the fact that we were doing it, let them handle the sale, let the banker handle the sale. On the back end, because the last few months you're just immersed in the sale process 24/7, I just needed to check out, even though I was still working with the acquirer on a part-time basis. I told them I needed a month to go to Europe and decompress and forget about all of the issues. that or the sale of the business. So, and then when I came back, it was just giving yourself time to explore what's next and being open to possibilities as opposed to thinking that there's only one way to go.
And were you involved with the EOS stuff back then?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we ran Hollywood on EOS. Yeah.
So you were running EOS, so then as you transitioned and doing other things, and you decided to eat your own cooking, as they say.
Yeah, it was a pretty easy transition for me because lots of these EOS businesses don't have integrators in their companies, or it's a tough position to fill. So I started consulting with these companies and helped them establish this integrator role within their businesses. Then I started taking on fractional integrator roles because I wasn't sure that I wanted to take anything part-time. And then I began facilitating the process as an implementer. So.
Great, thanks. So Jeff, you were in your business for a long time.
Indeed.
And so talk a little bit about, again, kind of the front end of the transition emotionally, and then, afterwards, how did you handle it?
Well, it's certainly an emotional roller coaster. You go from a place of joy where someone actually is interested in your company that you built, and you feel pretty good about that, to, oh my God, now what? And so it is an emotional roller coaster. I had the benefit of having 3 different transactions, basically. So by the time we got to the third one, I had dealt with a lot of the emotional aspects of letting go and realizing that when I go up the elevator to the 11th floor and see the company's name, that it's not mine, anymore. And it's tough. I got a kick out of your pencil comment, but yeah, it's totally different. But it takes some time, and I had a year consulting contract at the firm. I spent very little time there because of that, and I also wanted to stay out of the people's way that were running it, the new leaders. They didn't need my interference. And I helped them when they asked, but I try to stay out of the way. Similar to what Matt said, you as you transition out, you give yourself some time. You have to be patient because I was so immersed in a segment of business. I needed to just sit back and kind of let that pass through and then pay attention to what other opportunities there are. Talk to a lot of people. I'm helping a lot of young business folks. I'm listening and advising as they ask for my help and suggestions. So that's been really rewarding. So I think the next step for me is more of on a give back sort of situation rather than starting another business.
Great. Right over here.
Tell me about the impact on employees, both prior and post, and how you felt about that, how you handled it.
Okay, question for you over there. Impact on the other employees, both on the front end as well as post transaction. Whoever would like to start with that.
Well, for us, it was on the front end of it. It was really convincing them that the strategic buyer was going to make us a bigger, better company, better benefits, just all around more secure for them. On the back end, they didn't know how good they had it with me there. That being said, it's a different animal when you're dealing with, as we talked about, the 800-pound gorilla. There are huge benefits to having a big company own you. There are other benefits to having a small company own you, and our employees got to see them both. But really, it was incredibly important on the front end to give them a sense of security. And the security was that, they had a more secure job, they had more opportunities, they had better benefits that big companies could offer that we couldn't do. And, that calmed the waters for a bit.
That was probably the most difficult part of the sale for me, because it was a strategic buyer out of town. They basically rolled the trucks up and got the inventory, and then there were a couple key people that did the transition, and we had to have individual meetings with people and let them know that they were out of work. So it was painful. It was a very tough time for me. Yeah.
Yeah, that is part of this emotional journey. I mentioned that the last suitor, we threw up a lot of obstacles, things that were deal breakers, and one of them was all our people stay. They stay at the same salary, and then we also developed bonuses for retention. But it is still emotional. It was different. We were small. They came to me, small, 85, but not 50,000 people. And they could come to me, and we could make decisions quickly. So there's a lot of things that were different. We have lost a few people, but most of our key folks have hung around. But yeah, difficult.
All right. We got time for a couple more questions. For those of you who have not been here before, I do try to do a hard stop at 1, but again, everybody can stay as long as they want, and I'm sure the panelists will stick around for a little bit. Yes? The question was about revenue multiples for those of you over here, and just my personal answer would be depends on the business and the industry and a lot of other things. But anyway,
That would be mine, the same. It really depends on, if you're a manufacturer, you're a distributor, are you a commodity, are you a rep organization? What do you have that the more unique you are, the bigger the multiple.
What revenue multiple do you want?
Well, in my case, when I was just poking around, I was seeing somewhere between 4 and 5 times EBITDA. I ended up at 7.5, and so that's why I sold. Couldn't turn it down, and for me it was at October of 2012, and if everyone recalls, in January of 2013, all the taxes went up. So it didn't take me long to do the math.
anybody else?
I don't have anything to add.
Okay. All right, so a couple of rapid fire questions with rapid fire answers. What were you most surprised by throughout this process? I guess maybe the sale process.
Well, I had mentioned it earlier, but the fact that the acquirers are on their own timelines, and I thought that if we set the process, that they'd follow it, but they don't. And that's why a good banker will herd the cats for you. And also, just it's such a roller coaster ride. 1 minute you're high-fiving your partners thinking you're going to be rich, and then you get a phone call and you think you're going to run out of cash because the deal's going to fall through. And again, a good banker or intermediary will guide you through it and make sure you focus on the business and they focus on the process.
Mine was easy. I didn't realize that accrued vacation was a deduct off the sale price. And when you have 120 employees, it's a nice deduct. So watch that.
I think the legal aspect of the sale was much more daunting than I would have realized.
Had help with your counsel getting you through that, or?
Yeah, but it's, pages and pages of very complicated language. So, yeah, they did help, but you still have to get through it.
But for the guy who's married to the IP attorney, you
Well,
got help
I
on
didn't
that
have
stuff,
that.
right? Okay. All right. So then, how about when people get ready to sell their house? You paint the front door. You maybe take some stuff out of the house. There's you put money into the bathroom or kitchen. Good investment. What was a good investment for getting the business ready to sell?
I think keeping the house in order, as I said from the beginning, and perception sells. When we first acquired the business, it really looked like a chicken shed. And as we grew the business, I was focused on making sure that the business showed well. It's very similar. It's a great analogy because it's very similar to selling your house. You paint it, you clean it up, you make sure it's in order, and that's the first impression somebody gets when they buy your business. They walk in the lobby, they take a look at what you have there, and it's the same. It's that instant perception that you can't replace. There's boxes all over the place. If it needs a paint, et cetera, you just really clean it up. to me, that really made a difference.
I think the three areas that we invested in were really having a good EOS process so that we could keep growing quickly. We invested in a really solid management team. We hired the absolute best that we could afford. And then also we had an advisory board that we paid pretty well for the size of our business because we really wanted solid people to get us to that, grow us quickly in 3 years as quickly as we possibly could. So
I think you want something that has some stickiness to it, whether it be long-term contracts with clients, proprietary software, client retention strategy, things like that. Something that making sure you have. I think back to Jim's point, your house in order. That would be one. Is making sure there's something that after the buyer sees there's some longevity here.
All right, second to the last question. What do you think are the most common mistakes that either a future seller would make or a mistake that you made as you kind of go through this process? So maybe it was a mistake or a critical step. What would you tell them? Either don't do this because you made that mistake or watch out for it.
I'm a little bit different than these guys. We didn't, looking back, and you certainly had a lot of time to reflect after you sold your business. We really were lucky. I go back to the very first things that I said. We always had the business in order, so we always knew, the cash that it put out. We always knew our EBITDA number. I was relentless of getting those reports on a monthly basis and making sure we knew where we were. From a critical standpoint, I can tell you that the one thing that, thinking back, the one thing I would encourage everyone is it's an emotional process, whether you're the CEO that's been brought in or you're the founder and owner or the entrepreneur. Take a step back because it is an emotional process selling the business. So make sure you're sleeping on things and having a clear head moving forward and making sure that the things that you really are important for you are taken care of. I would just put the emotion in check. It's got to be a logical thing, not an emotional thing.
I would say the few things that I see most business owners, the mistakes that they make, are lack of planning for the sale. They don't have their books in order. I mean, so many of the times they go to an intermediary and they just don't have their books in order, and it's, they have to postpone the process for 6 months till they get things ready. Also that they don't build an entity, or they build an entity that lacks diversification in products, services, and customers. So there's too much concentration and there's too much risk for the acquirer. So there's going to be a deep discount on the price. And finally, that the business is just too reliant on the founder or the owner. They don't systematize their business, or systemize their business. I'm sorry.
I'll go back to my comment about distraction. I think we underestimated the impact of that distraction. Now, it wasn't, again, throughout the organization, but the leadership team was certainly consumed with the details, and that has an impact. So.
All right, so last question, short answer, 30 seconds-ish. What's one or two things that you'd like to wrap all this up and leave everybody with?
From my standpoint is again, as I've said all along, make sure your house is in order. That's number one, and number two, really prepare yourself for selling that business, because it is another transition in one's life. From my standpoint, I lived and breathed the business that I had. I went to bed in fear. I woke up in fear. I couldn't imagine what it was like not to have that fear in me. When you wake up after all that is done, the next fear that comes into you is, well, what am I going to do next? I would really think that through as you're selling that business, because it is the rest of, it's the next step in one's life. And, chances are, at least in my case, I knew I wasn't going to have a business that I was that emotionally involved in that I had just sold.
I would say really think about what you want in the transaction. I mean, really give it some serious consideration. I think most business owners think that it's maximizing the purchase price, and there is such a thing as enough money. I haven't seen it yet, but that's what people tell me. But find the right mix of the right acquirer and the things that are going to make you happy in the long term, not just on the day of the close.
I like what you say there, and it was really, the price was one thing, but it was really, well, what about the people that are staying with the organization? Are they going to be taken care of in the way that I would want them to? So it's personal, I would say.
Great. Thank you very much. Let's give everybody a round of applause. Again, a bunch of great events coming up, including next month here, utilizing boards. This is on your table, or visit the clube.com website. Thank you very much.